Hello, and welcome to episode 49 of the Foundry Roundtable, a podcast exclusively covering the Foundry for Star Trek Online. I'm not your taped Foundry author, but I play one on TV, Greendragoon. With me is the man behind the Academy Awards shocking bow tie malfunction, Markhawkman.
I can neither confirm or deny that.
Also with us is the man who, in a surprising upset, was the first person to ever win an Oscar by knife point, Bazag. And tonight we also have with us special guest Alenis Kendra.
Hey, everybody.
So, this is a bit of an unusual episode because this is the first episode we're trying to go without Drogan.
Hey, I'm here too.
Definitely going to be kind of an interesting show. So we invited Bazag here today to kind of fill in and kind of keep things going. So without further ado, I suppose we can move into Foundry news. The big news, of course, is that Foundry Challenge 9 has been announced. Captain Spurka announced it's going to be the Mirror of Romulus. For this challenge, we get to create a mission that's main plot revolves around the fate of Romulus and its legacy in the Mirror universe. What happens to Romulus? Does Molrion and the Romulan Republic exist? Along with the rest of the backstory is completely up to you. Don't forget the Remans and throw in some evil-looking goatees to boot. We have until today, which is Wednesday, March 5th, until Wednesday, April 16th to complete our entries. It definitely sounds like an interesting subject. All very quiet.
Well, I know that mirror universe stories were the main thing that people had been asking for in the thread. I mean, there's mirror universe and exploration, but exploration's kind of generic, so.
Yeah, it's definitely, and I think Brandflex has come on saying that it's one of his favorite subjects. So I'm not too surprised that something like it came up. It's definitely a open subject because we don't really know all that much about the Romulans in the Mirror Universe. We get one mention in Deep Space Nine, and we have absolutely no idea what the status of the Empire is or anything really.
Yeah, oddly enough, we actually do have a mirror universe version of one of the Star Trek Voyager characters, but we have no mirror universe Romulan characters. And Star Trek Voyager didn't do a mirror universe episode.
Well, they were on the wrong side of the galaxy too.
Yeah,
Just imagine Mira Hirogen. What would Hirogen be like as well? Seeing as the in Star Trek Online, the Hirogen and Romans are all tied in an alliance still.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things that my first inclination was, well, would they change all that much? But at the same time, considering like how much humans have changed and many of the other races, I kind of want to see just how differently the race can be portrayed. I don't know, maybe the Romulans are the Federation of the Mirror Universe.
Or maybe they're even worse than the Klingons.
well, my first thought for a plot hook is what if in the mirror universe, reunification was seen as mandatory after the humans decided to subjugate the Vulcans?
Well, I actually was kind of thinking about that because, I mean, after Vulcan was invaded by Earth. I mean, perhaps quite a few refugees fled to Vulcan. I mean, it could very well be that the Romulans saw their Vulcan brothers in distress and decided to take them in, and a certain form of reunification occurred through that manner.
Yeah, on the Romulans' terms, but
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, that's assuming that the Romulans happened exactly like they are here. So I mean, but I mean, even just if they did kind of do it out of sympathy or even to kind of gain some advantage, I mean, if you multiply that across the amount of time that's passed since um, that event occurred, then just about anything has happened. I mean, it could have completely shifted the political structure of Romulus.
well, yeah, I mean, because let's face it, you have Vulcans talking to Romulans on a daily basis about the Vulcan philosophy of life, and the Romulans actually have a reason to sit and listen.
Yeah. So I mean,
And
yeah,
and then fast forward 200 years.
yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to this, and who knows? I mean, maybe this I will even decide to enter one.
And it could have happened the other way too. I mean, the Romulans could have affected the Vulcans more.
True. I mean, in a way, I mean, there's a lot. It could almost been like the experiment in reunification that never happened over here. Um, I mean, I always kind of felt that the Romulans and Vulcans were like two extreme halves, and so in a way, they're kind of somewhat incomplete. But I mean, the combination of the two, I mean, maybe we would see something a little bit closer to Earth in the Prime universe. Anyway, then of course something completely different could have happened.
That's
Baz, what do you think of this challenge?
that's I suppose what you to say was kind of the whole point is to explore. I mean, you are exploring a lot of the suggestions in the thread was about exploration. What this political entity known as the Romulans are now. There's just so many different directions that you could take the mirror Romulans. You could take the mirrors and reverse it, or you could take take the concept of mirror as a darker episode, and or you could even there's just so many options that this challenge provides for the participants. And I think this is going to be fun challenge to play the missions of.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely can see a lot of creativity in this one. All right, so there was one other bit of news, and I have to thank Zorbine for reminding me of this one. The G&T show, who sets up a booth every year at Star Trek Las Vegas, and it's going to be late July, early August this year. Last year they put together a reel of like Foundry missions and whatnot, and I think they mostly did just a slideshow last year, but this year they're asking for Foundry trailers to put together a reel that they can show at their booth at Star Trek Las Vegas. I mean, this is a really great opportunity to kind of get some of the message out about the Foundry. So, I mean, if anyone has a Foundry mission that they'd like to have included, they can submit it to the GNT show, and I will add in a link into the show notes.
Yes, as far as we know, they haven't decided on what type of file format, or how you submit it yet. But if you have a trailer, a minute or so trailer for your Foundry mission that focuses on story, they'd love to hear it. Last year, actually, it was a documentary that Captain PFDennis put together that I think is still around somewhere on YouTube. That talked about the Foundry as a tool and
think that
and
might have been. I
promoted some missions.
think that might have been 2 years ago. Because they've had a booth several years now, and I think last year I remember them like asking for screenshots, put together a slideshow. But I know they put the trailer for the first part for in the Shadow of Midas Part 1 and showed it last year. So it's definitely a lot of fun to have your work shown.
Mm. This year isn't the first time that I'm actually going to be in Vegas. So if you want to come see me, come to Vegas. But I've got Captain PFDennis to change up my trailer a bit, just to make it more story friendly, so they can see it. Anyway.
And I know Drogon is also planning on being there. I'm still hoping that I might be able to go, but the saving up has not been going so well.
Hey Baz, are you going to bring a dick tog with you?
I'm going to try, whether I make it through customs or not.
I was gonna say, are they gonna let you on the plane with that?
Well, if you use a plastic replica, probably.
No, it'd probably be have to store it in my bag if I take it, just in case someone actually thinks it's real.
Yeah, you can't even take a shofar on a plane. Apparently, you can use it as a club. Ram's horn.
Yeah, that's weird. I mean, because that's kind of like telling someone they're not allowed to use a walking cane or crutches.
So, why don't we move on to what we've been working on? Mark, why don't you start off?
I haven't had time to do much in Foundry. I've had enough time to, tinker with things once or twice, and honestly, didn't go very far. Oh well.
Bazag, what have you been up to?
Well, I've been playing a few missions. Haven't been able to get into the Foundry much. Just been a bit busy with a lot of things that I've been doing. But there is a mission that I'd like you to play for next week that I played. You Greendragoon, you've finished the Purity series, but Captain PFDennis have just released an additional mission relating to that, Purity Revisited of Peace, where you finally get to wrap up the situation on Megara.
I'll say I knew those Purity reviews are going to come back to haunt me. So, Alenis, have you been doing much work in the Foundry lately?
Yes, actually, I'm working on part 2 of Bajor and Cardassia series, which is going to be totally just ridiculously silly, especially compared to the first one. And the whole thing started because I had just played a mission, which I will leave unnamed, which was very much a dude mission, and I was quite annoyed. And so the whole thing started with the thought, what would annoy the heck out of a guy if they were playing a mission? And it kind of went from there. And I promise I tamed it down quite a bit since then, but yeah, that was where I started. So it's a wedding, and you have to help pick out clothes. And let's see, lots of stuff like that. Oh, you have to deal with a temperamental pregnant woman who happens to be me.
Nice. I like that.
And yeah, basically the wedding is being sabotaged. There's a whole political thing going on. So you're sort of undercover and providing security and trying to figure out who's doing the sabotaging. But in the meantime, you're also doubling as the maid of honor because the maid of honor is in sick bay.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those mistakes that you sometimes see is when an author forgets that there's more than one gender or one potential gender playing a Foundry mission.
Yeah, I'm so sick of flirting with Orions. It's not even funny.
I remember one of Kirkpatrick's missions where you end up talking to this Andorian who makes some weird comment about having had a romantic relationship with you, which came out particularly funny to me because I was playing the mission as the female liberated Borg Trill, who, that just didn't make any sense whatsoever.
Yeah. Yeah, you definitely have to be very careful about assumptions that you make about the player captain, or even really the bridge officers. They're all kind of unknowns to the author.
Yeah, you can't really assume anything with a Foundry captain. As the liberated Borg Trill, uh, that's one of the examples that you're not going to come across very often, and you could you really can't specifically account for all the various types of things you can, but you can at least make a general.
Yeah. Kind of has to stick middle of the road. I mean, usually they're either like in Starfleet, Romulan Republic, or KDF. I mean, at least if you can make those assumptions, at least if you mark your mission as Romulan, if it is. But yeah, beyond that, you kind of have to keep it middle of the road. I mean, it's easier with Fed just because Starfleet officers won't be too far apart from each other. I mean, they're all like professionally trained. So
On the flip side of that, though, is that if the story you're writing, requires a specific approach, I mean, just stick a disclaimer in the opening, and then go for it.
well, that's also an opportunity for dialogue choices to kind of branch your dialogue and allow the conversation to go more than one way. So I
I
mean,
get the feeling that Alenis' mission really only works if you play it from the perspective of using a female character.
I don't
No,
know. It could be very funny from the perspective of a male character.
I'm actually writing it with males in mind.
Oh.
There's lots of sarcasm, tons and tons of sarcasm, with like one response for the enthusiastic female. So there's like all these options when you're originally given the mission of like, are you serious, sort of, permission to speak freely, sir, and then you go on this whole rant. Or you can say, ooh, I love weddings. But there's like 5 options that you can choose from for your response. It's like this huge dialogue tree. It took me 2 hours to write just the opening dialogue because there's so many different options.
Nice.
And then all the costumes. Oh my goodness. Okay, so at the wedding, most of you guys know this, but for those out there who don't, I've extended an invitation to any authors who want to come to the wedding and hang out at the reception and promote their missions. So it's basically going to be just an Easter egg in the mission where the player can go and hang out at Club 47 and talk to Foundry authors about their missions.
That's neat. How many have you gotten? A few responses yet?
Yes. So far, I have Baz is going to be there, and let's see. I'm trying to remember. I think I have like 3. That's really bad. Hold on. I'll pull it up.
And that will be another link that I will include in the show notes.
And anybody who wants to be included, all they have to do is get me their screenshots.
Okay.
And I have a form that they can fill out. I'll give you the link to that.
Oh, a while back I actually made a screenshots of all the sliders for my characters, and here's the one for the liberated Borg join trill I mentioned earlier. Gonna stick it in the oops, wrong button. The Skype thing. There you go.
You should have posted in the chat too.
Right.
I guess I will talk about what I've been doing, and actually we are sitting on what I've been working on, and this all started I think over the weekend when the discussion of or a new author was asking about um, creating Romulus, the old Romulan capital city that was on Romulus before it was destroyed. And someone made the claim that we just didn't have the assets and it couldn't be done. And I took that as a personal challenge. And so over the last 2 days, I've actually been working on building this, which is my interpretation of the Romulan capital city. So up there, we've got the administrative inner circle, and then you can actually run around. And over here, you've got what I've been calling the canal, which is basically a semicircle that runs around the city. And just to give you an idea, this is the what the Romulan capital city looked like in Star Trek Nemesis. As you can see, it they definitely like their circles. So you have the inner circle, which is the administrative area where the Senate meets, and then you've got lots of varying city all around it. But then at the back side, you've got this. One side, you've got the river flowing through in from the sea. Then on the other side, you've got this canal that makes up the other side of the circle. So I kind of decided that's where I was going to build my section of the city.
Haha.
Actually, you know, the way that the Romulan capital city was laid out reminds me a lot of the description of Atlantis in Plato's works, or I think it was Plato.
Well, there's definitely a very Roman feel to the Romulan city, especially if you kind of look closely at it. You can see lots of like columns and various things, especially off to one side. You can see they've got more like a park area, less developed, just outside the city, which has lots of things like columns and standing monuments and stuff like that. So there's definitely a little bit of Roman hints in the city's construction. But love to know what you guys think. It's funny because at the time I built this, I did the Foundry Challenge hadn't been announced, and so the day after I get this thing finished, or at least as far as it is now, Smirk announces the challenge as being a Romulan mirror universe, which is like one of only two scenarios in which you might see Romulus.
No, I think it's very, yeah, it is meant to be very Romulan. I mean, just because Romulus is based on Roman mythology, is Romulus and Remus are the two founders, the twins of the Romulan society. So there is definitely a strong mythological basis, but I'm really liking this map, I have to say.
Yeah. I still want to do a little bit more to it. It's pretty empty right now. I mean, as far as no people, and it'd be nice to like go through and add like smaller details. I laid out all the buildings and whatnot, but I haven't like added shop stalls or like plants or benches or stuff like that. Just kind of make the city feel really alive instead of an empty place. But it's definitely been a really fun challenge. I mean, map building is probably my favorite aspect of the Foundry.
Yeah, I kind of want to like.
Same here.
All right,
I kind
so
of want to.
oh.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say I kind of want to litter your map with things that are blown up and some dead little kids, and
Oof.
it's got kind of that spooky feel to it.
Oddly, even though there are cryptic missions that have like human skeletons and stuff laying around, we can't add those to Foundry missions.
Yeah, because that couldn't be misused in any way. I don't know. I think I've done charred remains in the past, and kind of get close with the costume editor. But no,
Well, you remember
Skeletons
Temple
in the Foundry,
Ambassador,
but
right?
not human. They're massive
Giant monster
creatures.
skeletons. Well, one of them's actually Godzilla-sized.
Yeah, I
There-
still want to do like just a hand reaching out from under rubble or something. I think that'd be awesome.
It'd be
You
tricky.
can
I
actually
mean,
do that.
it'd be tricky, but you could pull it off.
If you position a contact so that they're using an animation that causes them to be laying down. So some of those animations will have their hands, away from their body far enough that you could put a rock on top of their body and hide their body.
Yeah, I plan on doing it at some point. I haven't gotten a mission that dark in the works yet, but it's kind of brooding back there in the back of my mind.
In one of my missions, I faked the whole body's buried in rubble thing by having giant blocks of ice, and you walk up to a giant block of ice, scan it, and go like, oh, there's a corpse frozen inside this. You don't really see it though.
I've wanted to do a Foundry mission at some point. It's kind of one of my off ideas that I really got around to. Of doing a city that's in a before and after stage where you jump between the after stage where it's all destroyed and like dark, and then you like either time shift or something and end up in the city before the accident which destroyed it. You kind of have to keep moving between these two states to solve the mission.
Kind of like that one really stupid Voyager episode where Janeway goes into the past to try and prevent the accidental destruction of a civilization, only to realize that her going into the past was the reason why it got destroyed in the first place.
Well, they didn't intentionally go into the past. They fell through one of those time fissures.
Oh yeah, that's right.
I love that episode.
I liked it too.
Isn't that the one where Kira's supposed to die, and then Odo has been like on the? That's the one.
That's Voyager.
Right?
You're thinking of DS9.
Oh yeah, sorry.
That's Janeway and Paris.
Time's Orphans.
Okay, Voyager. What planet was it?
Just some random planet that they happened to fly past.
I don't know if they ever got a name.
Oh yeah, wasn't there okay? So it was their energy source exploded.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that one too. And there aren't many Voyager episodes that I actually like.
Yeah,
the weird part about that one is that it's a temporal paradox, and the energy source wouldn't have exploded if Voyager hadn't had someone fall through one of the time fissures.
Yeah, but it was also kind of a nice turnaround that their own rescue attempt causes what they're trying to be rescued from.
And then Janeway sabotages the rescue attempt and saves everyone.
But it's not like temporal paradoxes haven't occurred elsewhere.
Repeatedly.
That's the fun of it, because time travel is really hard to explain.
That's why people call Janeway the arch time criminal. I'm looking at
I think there are other reasons. So, Why don't we move on to mission reviews? Mark, you had a mission review?
Yes. The Krios Conspiracy, Part 1 by CommanderMic. This is a KDF mission where, as part of the backstory, he elaborates on the status of Krios in the 2409 timeline. In this timeline that he's using, Krios has actually willingly rejoined the Klingon Empire after having managed to acquire their independence at some point in the past. Why they did so is somewhat complicated, and basically they decided to rejoin the Klingon Empire for mutual protection because, well, the Klingons are there, and I guess no one else is. I don't remember that part exactly. Anyway, so the mission has a lot of really, really nice sets in it because one of his that he builds is a full-scale nightclub, but it's not just inside a building that happens to be a nightclub. It's like the full nightclub. You have like the entrance area, the actual nightclub, and then you have storage rooms off to the side and stuff like that. Let's see here. Anyways, the basic plot of the mission is that a Klingon ship got destroyed near Krios, and not the Klingon High Command, but a Gorn who happened to be someone who knew the captain of the ship that got destroyed, contacts you and has you look into the matter as a way of figuring out what's going on. And obviously, your first step is to try and to make contact with the Gorn that were involved with this. So you go to Krios, you track down where the guy is. Then he shows you what he knows, and it goes on from there. And well, the ending of the mission is actually something of a surprise. I'm not really going to explain what exactly you find after you investigate the ship's disappearance, but it's interesting to say the least. You had really good map designs. The one flaw, and it's probably something that he's fixed, is that he's not a native English speaker, so a few things here and there, and but it's not something that you would have difficulty figuring out what he's talking about. So yeah, and very good mission and well worth playing. I'm actually looking forward to finding out what he does for part 2 because I'm really not able to guess exactly where he's going with this one.
Awesome. I definitely know.
It seems that Krios is fairly popular in terms of the Klingon. Krios Falling by Alien de Jour is another Krios-based Foundry mission, and they seem to be both focusing on the Kriosians joining back with the Empire in one way or another.
I definitely know it can help to have you get some of your fellow authors or players to play through the missions, especially if you're not native speaker, but just to go through and do a proofread.
Well,
often help.
I did 4 pages of proofreading, so yeah.
Yeah.
And let's see. Well, one comment I had is that it's not really like an issue per se, but this guy's map is one of the reasons why I like to manually adjust the numbers associated with the props that I place, because from what I know, he positioned them all by moving them around with the mouse cursor. It's not quite as precise, so when he placed walls, you'd see little, like juts here and there. But I mean, he did a very good job of it. Just.
Sometimes for major map placements such as walls and stuff, I'll use snap to grid, just so that when I do move it through mouse, I know everything will line up. Well, the walls and all that stuff will line up.
You kind of have to be careful with that.
Yeah, because
some props don't match the grid.
Well, yeah, there's also the fact that it'll cause planes to clip.
Yeah, that's why when I build it, do it. Then if I need to, you just know when to use snap to grid and know when to not to.
Yeah, I totally ran into that on my Cardassia map. I had to surround the whole city with walls, because the best map I could find unfortunately had water, and of course Cardassia doesn't, so I had to block it from view. So there was lots and lots of lining up walls.
I actually don't worry about the texture flickering thing because, well, cryptic maps do it all the time.
Yeah, but they shouldn't.
I know, but they do.
All right, so Alenis, you also had a mission you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, so I just got done playing Captain PFDennis's 2-parter that he released, or rather, I got done playing the first part of it. And I totally loved it. It is very DS9 inspired, and DS9 is my favorite Trek series, so of course, right there, I loved it. And also, he's actually a really good writer.
Yeah,
so
is.
I enjoyed the plot. It definitely kept me going, and I can't wait to play part 2. And then the other great thing was there is this Vorta character, and he has the dialogue down spot on. It's very Wayoon. And the effects are really cool too. I don't want to give too much away, but let's just say that the enemies that are involved, he has to use a lot of effects to portray them and keep you interested. And I knew, because of being a DS9 fan, right away what it was. But for someone, there would be some mystery and intrigue there. So really enjoyed that one.
Is it Buck Bokai?
What?
Is it Buck Bokai? From the episode If Wishes Were Horses?
Talk about the London Kings player that Jake was.
It was really an alien
with on the
taking
holodeck.
on the appearance of a holodeck character.
Oh, no. It's a much more well-known DS9 villain. And I won't say any more than that because I don't want to spoil anything.
Yeah, and I've definitely seen other Captain PFDennis's missions that pull heavily from like characters and stories from the Deep Space Nine. But I definitely know that he's a very strong DS9 fan.
Yeah, and the other cool thing is he takes some minor characters that you really don't find out what happens to them, and he writes a whole story around them. And then I should mention too, if anybody is looking for the mission, it's still in the reviews tab, at least last I checked. And it's not under Captain PFDennis, it's under his other account, which is just PFDennis. So if you're searching for it, that's important to know. And it's the Phoenix of Bavar Part 1 that I'm talking about. Oh, and just to get back to you guys on what we were talking about earlier, I did, I don't know if you guys saw, I put the link for the wedding RSVP into the chat there. So if anybody wants their character to be at the reception, just fill out that form and I will make it happen. And Relum Time and Zorbane are the other two that have responded.
Awesome.
Oh, and of course Hippie, the Mayhems are doing the music for the reception, so.
Of course. Would you get anyone less?
So that was really fun because I got to dress the Mayhems. I had a blast doing that. I think I spent 3 hours working on their costumes. Maybe more than that. Yeah, that was the 2 missions that I played before. Cap's mission was the Mayhems. And just a little plug, I have my first segment on Primetime. That'll be coming out on Monday, and I'll be reviewing Hippie's mission. So if you guys want to take a listen.
Nice. All right, so I guess we can move on to discussion topics. You guys have any topics that you'd like to bring up?
Well, let's see here. Choosing proper backdrop seems like a fun topic of choice.
Okay.
I mean, because one of the things that I've noticed about backdrops is that backdrops do actually a lot for your mission. I mean, because certain backdrops actually will add more than just lighting to the set. They'll actually add special visual effects too. I mean, the most noticeable one is the Borath Barge one, which adds this gray mist to the entire map. And that's part of the backdrop. It's not a weather effect or anything like that. But there's also several things that will have very interesting quirks to the lighting, like one of the ones that's meant to be used for the Empok Nor map has lighting that's erratic, and you'll see things like dim and brighten periodically to simulate being inside a space station where the main power is offline and the lights are all being run on backup power that isn't completely stable. I mean, so, and for exterior maps, the backdrop adds weather patterns to the sky and all sorts of weird stuff like that. I mean, like, there's one of them that actually adds purple plasma storms to the sky, which, there are uses for that. Is it something you necessarily want to use on everything? No. But to figure out exactly what backdrops do requires you to, well, either look outside the Foundry or manually test them.
I should point out that I believe it was Kirkfat actually started a thread on the Starbase UGC forums where he went through and cataloged, I think, all of the interior backdrops, which can be a very tedious task because you don't have as many visual cues as to what it'll actually do to a map.
Yeah, that's really cool. I actually used that when I was doing my mission.
Yeah, I know every time I've done a custom map, it's required a great deal of trial and error to find a suitable backdrop, especially with interiors, because some maps or some backdrops have stars, some backdrops have special backgrounds, and still others are just black.
I'm not sure which one it is, but there's one that I've seen people using as a backdrop that adds floating rocks to the horizon, and I have no idea which one that is.
Yeah, it's definitely it can require a lot of back and forth and running in and out of preview. I would say when you're building a map, it's almost kind of sometimes better to kind of get that stuff in first, or when it's maps early on before you get too much stuff in and the load times start to creep up.
Also, since the backdrop really kind of, I guess you could say, sets the tone for the map, it's best to figure out if you can get it the way you want it to, because having the backdrop a certain way will influence the way you build the map. Because if you build the map to look like this, then you change it to use the Borath mist effect after you build everything, suddenly you might realize that stuff that doesn't look the way you wanted it to.
I know there was a interior I had in part 2 that I've been working on. It's a very large interior. It's got a very large vertical space, and I wanted fog like above and below, so that I could have like a large central structure descending above and below into oblivion. And that took a lot of trial and error to find a one that not only had fog that worked well enough for what I needed, but also had a star backdrop for Windows.
I've noticed that there are can't remember what I was going to say now. That's sad. Oh, that's right. With interiors, some maps have windows and some maps don't. So it depends. And in the cryptic, in the story missions. So if you have a map that has exterior, then you're more likely to get something that has as windows, and you're more likely to get something that has stars or swirly sky or something detailed in the actual sky skybox. Than than other interiors where it's just lighting and atmospheric type settings.
Oh, I just talked to Cortag in the text chat window, and he says that the floating rocks one is called Mech Exterior Sky, or Exterior Sky Mech, one of the two. Anyways, other than that, for one of my missions, I actually made a conscious effort to find black backdrops that had like no features whatsoever, because the idea was that you're inside a subspace pocket, and when you look out the window, there's literally nothing to see.
Oh, like the Void.
Well, I was actually thinking of Time Trap from the animated series. But yeah, same basic premise.
Well, that kind of segues well into my topic, which was I wanted to talk about building cities, which was part of the inspiration of why I wanted to build this map, is just to kind of talk about some of the tips and tricks for building a city from the ground up. I know it's not too hard to kind of come up with like a colony or a collection of buildings, but it gets much more complicated when you want to try and make a city feel expansive, like it's much bigger than even you can see. And obviously, we kind of run into problems with the building limit only being 64. So it's kind of one of those things that you need to make the most out of what you can, as well as kind of trying to imply a larger size than what just the area that you can go to. Oh.
I can only think of one cryptic mission that really, really makes a serious effort at doing that. I mean, other than the stuff where you're on Bajor in the Hathon, but I think it's the mission where you kill that Tal Shiar guy Hakiv.
Yeah, it's
See-
Yeah, cutting the cord.
Yeah, cutting the cord. In that one, you go down to the planet, and you are literally fighting Tal Shiar troops on a Romulan planet in a city. And when you look off in the distance, you see more city. And obviously, you can't wander around through the entire city. So they had to make ways to keep you in this area and whatnot.
yeah, that's always a challenge. I mean, some of the, especially the early Cryptomax, they kind of just let you go to the edge, and that was fine because it was all just plants and more plants. But yeah, in that case, I mean, there's also First City. Although First City has walls specifically, kind of keep your view very contained. Um, yeah, and there they had to kind of, since you could get up to the rooftops, they had to keep you, or had to give you something to see in the distance, which is always a challenge because the more stuff they squeeze into a map, the higher the poly count goes, and the slower everyone's computer runs.
This reminds me of the Starfleet Academy map, because a long time ago there was a bug that let you exit the area that they'd bounded off by the invisible walls. So you could actually walk out into San Francisco Bay. And when you go out into San Francisco Bay, the whole, perspective illusion thing with San Francisco off in the distance and the Bay Bridge going across the bay kind of, gets warped out into a rather different perspective, I guess you could say.
Yeah, that actually brings up a great point and something I wanted to talk about, and that is the concept of forced perspective. The most well-known example, at least, is the ships in First Space Dock. If you go into the ship customization area, all of the ships and the rest of the space dock interior are significantly smaller than they ought to be, and that's just a kind of because they cryptic maps just aren't large enough to really build it the way it should be, but B, because all of that extra space isn't needed. You can't really tell the difference from your own limited vantage point. And I actually have in this map an example of this um, over here. If you look up, you can see these large wing statues. This is something cool I found out as I was searching through assets, and you can see the wing statue, and then across the way you can see a similar version that appears much smaller. And in fact, the ones on this side are significantly smaller than the ones on the far side. They're actually two different versions of the asset. And what I'm doing here, and I've kind of sank all the buildings in to try to make them look smaller. And the whole idea is that it makes the far side appear further than it actually is, just to kind of sell that idea of distance without actually giving distance.
I suppose one other thing with forced perspective is that you actually have to force the perspective. If you, like with the Starfleet Academy, if you get out into the bay, then it doesn't really look well. So you've got to really be careful about fencing the player into that specific area.
Exactly. And yeah, that's one of the things is forced perspective is only useful if you can control where the player is going to be. So it's actually very important that you plan out your space. One of the first things I'll do is plot out exactly where I need the player to be able to go. So if they need to beam in, run over to a market, talk to or visit a shop further down, and then end up at the administration building, I need to plan out in advance all of those locations and exactly where the player is going to be able to go.
Actually, well, one thing I thought of while you were talking about that is that originally we didn't have the multiple sizes of Romulan bird statues in the Foundry,
Mm-hmm.
and that's one of the things they added relatively recently, which is actually really cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of them is a building asset and one of them is a detail asset. But yeah, I mean, actually, I think I can show you an example. So that giant bird that's up there also has a smaller version that is only this big. You can kind of see and thankfully they're virtually identical, but except for their size, so it works perfectly for that. And then I also did it up here with the administration inner ring, which is a lot closer than it ought to be. Um, I just kind of try to build it. The further something's supposed to be, the smaller I'll make it. So all of those trees are like smaller one. I found like smaller mini trees and kind of tried to hide as much of the building to make it look like it was smaller. Of course, it's got all those Klingon races, which are pretty large, but not nearly as large as they ought to be. One thing to kind of keep in key is you can completely blow through your your object limits trying to build a city. So it's incredibly important to not build what people can't see. Um, and like a lot of cases, for instance, like these farther buildings, the bottom layer is missing. I actually pulled them out so that you can't tell. Because I mean, you can't see it; the wall's in the way. And I strategically put walls along the sides of the region to prevent people from seeing the edges, so to speak. And if you go out, and there's actually a gap in the wall I missed. If you were to go outside this area, the whole illusion would fall apart because you would see that there's actually nothing out here.
And they have trees and buildings literally floating in midair.
Yeah. And I got my character.
And see,
Just move towards me.
There we go.
Or
Back
do
roll did
that.
it.
Either one works.
Okay, so yeah, as you can see, everything just kind of stops as soon as you get out of view. Wall stops. There's the building you can see out front. Obviously, no base. Tree just standing here.
These buildings look really funny when there's no underneath to them.
Exactly, but you can't tell it from the other side of the wall because the wall's in the way.
Yep.
There you can see the inner circle, which goes only so far and then quits. But yeah, it's all about planning your layout and not building any more than you have to. And a lot of that comes to just being mindful of how you're controlling the player perspective. Like I said, I mean, for here, I'm using the wall to prevent the player from seeing like out beyond, and just using these strategically placed buildings to imply that there is more beyond.
I am so stuck.
Back roll.
Trying to. Oh, there.
And then you fall off the.
Yeah, don't do that. I can't save you from that.
Yeah, he didn't add a way to get back up.
Well, the idea is that the player can't get out, so
Except he missed this spot.
yeah. Well, it's fortunate because then I can kind of show the illusion.
Yeah, we don't want a repeat of when I fell off the cliff in memory lane.
So
did you guys look up the location where you can fall through the floor in the Dyson Battle Zone?
I don't think I've found it.
Oh, I don't remember the exact spot. It's somewhere near the center of the city area. It's in it's the inside edge of one of those corners where two of the walkways intersect.
Yeah, that's
I
definitely
don't
another.
remember exactly which one. People have been posting pictures of it on the forums intermittently.
Yeah, and that's definitely another thing than even something Cryptic engages in the mission is make sure test, try and get out of your map to make sure that there is no way to get out of your
Well,
map.
I think they did because that as far as I know, it's the only one that I've ever been able to find, and I've gone almost everywhere in that map.
Yeah, but I mean, my Foundry test character is a Cation just because they have the slightly higher jump, which makes it perfect for testing for like seeing if you can jump on objects or get up over something or get out of or a closed-in area.
Mm. Yeah, cations are fun in Bajor because if you do it just right, you can actually figure out how to get up on top of the rooftops in Hathon,
Not
and
anymore.
that does weird things to the map. It does not want you to go up there.
And not anymore. Tumor Boy put in a big invisible ceiling to prevent that.
Aww.
Yeah, I've got screenshots from my character standing up on the walkways and balconies on Alphen.
You can still get up there in the Foundry.
True. You can just put a spawn point up there in the Foundry. Something to consider especially when you're replicating a location, like a canon location, is I find is look for like important, like significant landmarks, but don't try to get yourself bogged down in replicating every detail. There is in this case, I mean, there was a number of buildings I could have tried to replicate that it probably would have spent me forever to even get close and probably still wouldn't have looked right. In that case, I just kind of tried to look at what the key features were to kind of sell it, and then try to replicate those and not worry about like making sure that every building is exactly as it should be. And
But yeah, like instead of actually making a building that's 200 feet tall, you put a building off in the distance where you can't see the base and raise it up 200 feet.
yeah, or I mean, like combine a number of monuments together to kind of form a skyscraper. But since it's so far off, you can't tell that it's just a couple of monuments stuck together and not a full-size building.
And hills help too.
Yeah, I mean,
Like if you stick stuff on top of a hill.
yeah, or even sinking things into the ground. You can often get a different effect for like hiding the base or the majority of a building or another object inside the ground.
I think another thing to keep in mind when you're doing a map is that these are whole planets. It's not countries, they're planets. And in the episodes, we only see a teeny tiny portion of each planet. So really, if you're just going for somewhere on a planet, there are so many places we haven't seen that as long as you go for the feel, you can really do anything you want.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
even
Like
because well, sorry.
go ahead.
Well,
just,
in the example of Romulus, you can. We've only seen the capital city. I mean, there's probably what thousands of other cities on Romulus that don't look like the capital city.
yeah, and I mean even in the capital city, I mean, if you look at the picture, you can see that there is actually plenty of countryside clearly visible, not far from the capital.
And the other thing too, and this is actually one of my pet peeves with Star Trek that it kind of annoys me. You don't see any ethnicity on the different planets, really. I mean, if you think about it, if you look at like say Bajor for example, almost everybody is Caucasian and the pretty much all of the fashion is very similar. And if you look at like any of the episodes on Earth, of course you have all the variety there.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's the alien monocultures trope, which honestly I think the only reason why the writers did that was to make it so that the alien civilization had a distinct feel to it, so that it didn't, so that you could easily tell that these guys were a specific group of people. I mean, like in the episode with the Keth, not the Ocampans, mind you, or the Casprit, but a race called the Kes from TNG. Everyone wears the same hairstyle, and everyone has a colored streak in their hair. Why? It's never explained, but it's a distinctive look for the race that otherwise wouldn't really have had much of a distinctive feature to them. Is it necessarily a good thing? Well, I don't know, but it's something that they did so that, I guess, as a storytelling device.
And there's also so much topography that we really don't see on each planet. That's the other thing too. Like at some point, I really want to do an underwater mission on Bajor. They have tons of oceans. We never see the Bajoran oceans.
Or Risa.
Wasn't relevant to the story.
Right. But you can totally do that in the Foundry. And go there.
Also,
I mean,
we have on a few occasions seen episodes in the TV show where they actually do go underwater and do things. It's just that it's only a few episodes, and it still looks really cool.
Yes. That was one of the Voyager episodes that I liked, is the one where there's that planet that's all water. It's kind of like yeah. Yep. I thought that was I kind of hated the plot, but I loved the way it looked.
Oh yeah.
That's the one where
Tom Paris spends 30 days on the brig.
Tom Paris, gets demoted and brigified.
And it was like the one time he didn't really deserve it.
He still got promoted faster than Harry Kim.
I know, that is so not fair. I'm like, poor Harry. It's like if I was on Voyager, I would be Harry Kim. That's so me.
Yeah,
we have
really get that, but
we have a Hippiejohn in the chat room. Woo.
I'm gonna kill him.
On?
Hippie, where have you been? Oh, and he's online too. I'm gonna bring him in.
Bazag, I need to borrow your knife so I can stab him to death.
Well, I'll think about it.
Bazag doesn't share his knives.
Well, I do, but for specific reasons. And they're my magically enchanted loner ones that can't stab me back.
You're supposed to only use those things in Neverwinter. What are they doing over here?
Well, Star Trek has its daggers.
I suppose that's true.
Just because it's just because it maybe uses different kinds of energy, doesn't mean it's not effectively magic.
Actually, there have been a few episodes of Star Trek that dealt with magic, believe it or not.
Oh, there was that TOS one where Kirk.
The Halloween episode?
Was it the Halloween, the one with the snake cave thing that controlled the primitive culture?
Vat or Vault? No, that's not it either. Dang it. I don't remember.
Yeah, it was a name like Vault. So that was the creature, the snake cave thing. But anyway.
So anyway, to wrap up this topic, I wanted to finish off with a couple of tips. First off, especially when you're building on a platform like this, you very much need to remember to set your Y relative to 0 altitude. If you leave it at default set to terrain, it will create all sorts of weird and strange things that you will be trying to fix because it'll be shifting with the ground below.
Yeah. You put two things right next to each other with the same 0 altitude, yet they're not level.
Yeah.
It makes for all sorts of frustration if you don't set it to 0 altitude.
Yeah. And a point that was brought up earlier is adaptive grid is your friend, especially when you're laying out things, until it isn't. If you do things like laying out walls and whatnot, you definitely need to make sure that you offset them a little bit, at least, so that they don't clip with each other. Sometimes you can get away with it if the wall isn't a flat surface, but yeah, if it has any flat surfaces, the two planes will overlap each other and start flickering. I think that's about.
I think the worst example of clipping in a cryptic mission is the interior of the facility 4028 map, because in that one, the textures that they applied to add the numbers to the walls and floors clip constantly.
Yeah, and they just need to offset that a little. You can kind of see it. I mean, there's various things that'll show up, and if it wasn't properly offset. All right. So, anybody else got anything to add on the subject of building cities?
I think Hippie does.
Make them with buildings.
Hey.
Yeah, make them with buildings. Sorry, I walked in in the middle of the conversation, so I'm not sure what I would have to say.
I suppose the only thing that I would have to add is that a city is more than just the buildings. That it's the life that makes up the city. So there's merchants, there's civilians going about doing their business, there's personal people engaging in conversations, there's all sorts of things that you can have going on in a city that brings it just from a map to a living, breathing place.
I mean, I suppose the simplest one is just to, have people standing in random locations.
Yeah, but even more than that, I mean, try to have people like doing things. Like, I mean, why is the city full of people? What do people do here?
And please, varying age demographics. Come on, people. Not everyone is between 20 and 30.
That's a good point. That's a good point. When you're making something come alive, vary when you're trying to make an area come alive, vary the age, the look, the sex, you definitely vary up the NPCs that you're using to make the place come alive. This game makes it hard enough. Star Trek Online makes it hard enough to differentiate characters to begin with sometimes, that doing your best to even just add a little bit of life to the background, give somebody a bigger nose or a more wider eyes or something, just vary them up a little.
Well, when I was making Diplomacy in the Gamma Quadrant, I realized that pretty much the only way, other than drastically different hair to make it so people could tell the difference between the various Vorta from the distance, was to give them different colors of outfits.
Yeah.
I know Drogon likes to use the randomize button, kind of try and mix up his NPCs.
Yeah, well, when I was doing the Beta Rana incident, I actually used that for most of the Boslit characters. Then basically what I do is I start with an alien, click the randomize button. If it's something I thought was horrible, I click the randomize button again. And then if it was something that I liked, I would go in and make it look like a Boslit.
I gotta say, I think that when you use the randomize button for costumes, it totally looks like what happens when you tell a 4-year-old they can pick their own outfit.
True.
So we just have to look to Hippie to see what happens in that case.
I don't know. I wear mostly grays and browns, Bazag, so they kind of match just about anything. So,
Gray and brown tie-dye? Seriously?
no, the tie-dye only happens during the summer.
What you get for living in Colorado?
It's freezing right now.
Yeah. It's what, like 20 degrees out, something like that.
It's cold here. That's all I know.
All right. Well, do we have another topic?
No, you guys probably you have Alenis Kendra on the show. You probably already have the topic I was thinking of bringing up
What's that?
covered. I wanted to talk about the reviews that some of the stuff that comes to mind from the reviews that you've been doing, Kendra. Some of the way that approaching a story, trying to tell it from a point of view that is either neutrally presented, so that it doesn't feel different or uncomfortable or weird for a female player with a female character playing through it. A lot of people write from a very male perspective, and I wanted to just talk a little bit about that, like what differences and what kind of things you're looking for when you're reviewing things for, what did you call it, girl reviews? Yeah, that was the topic that came to mind for me.
Sorry, I just had to mute for a minute there and take my headphones off, so I missed part of that.
It was
I heard
just
most of it though.
Yeah, just basically wanting to talk about what kind of things those reviews bring up and why you're looking for the specific things that you are, and that sort of thing. So
I think I touched on it a little bit, but
I figured you guys probably would have talked about that. So
I didn't really talk about it in the context of reviews, though.
Well, what are you looking for? I guess is and why do reviews from that perspective? What is the inspiration? What is the inspiration to do that? And what do you think? I just feel like it touches on a whole lot of really, really important societal norms that it's difficult to write for an audience where you're not going to know what sex they are, whether male or whether it's going to be male or female. Not that you're writing something necessarily different, but that you have to train your mind to address things as you're writing. Some of the things that you bring up, most humor is presented from a very, if you're a guy writing jokes and writing humor, you're most likely going to be approaching that humor from a very male-centric or male-created point of view and way of thinking. So your reviews really touch on a lot of interesting things to me, basically. So.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess I've totally had the experience from the opposite perspective, especially with the mission I'm working on right now. I mentioned earlier that I totally wrote this review started writing this mission after having played a mission and being really frustrated that it was totally a dude mission. And so totally sarcastically started making a mission that would drive guys crazy. And then adapting it to actually make it so that a guy could play it and hopefully enjoy it afterwards. But I have to switch how I think, because I'm going along playing as me and writing as me, and then I have to stop and think, oh, wait a minute, like 90% of the people who are going to play this mission are going to be guys, and they're not going to appreciate this particular dialogue, or they're not going to want their character to say blah 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 in this situation. They may want to say blah blah blah. So I have to stop and actually try and think like a guy, which is kind of a little bit of a brain bender for me.
I imagine.
I think it's that way for everyone, really.
Yeah, I definitely do. It touches, like, I guess what it is there's one of the people that I know in my life is a very, very big. I want to say feminist, but that's the wrong word. She's not really a feminist, but she's very big on pointing out places where society is really bad, very often at presenting things from a point of view that is enjoyable by pretty much anyone. A lot of what society presents, be it television shows, messages in commercials, for goodness sake, be it going to a movie, listening to music. We are kind of, as a society, really over. I want to say overshadowed, but we have this very male centric way of thinking and way of being that
Well, I
is
think
really hard to get past sometimes.
I really think it's just, accepted stereotypes, and letting them define us. I don't think most people actually fit into a stereotype. I mean, it's kind of like when you go shopping and you're trying on clothes and average size is like no one.
Well, my thought on stereotypes is that stereotypes are, at their core, a way of categorizing people. It's not so much, a way of saying this is bad or this is good, but as a way of simply sorting things into. I mean, it's almost like alphabetizing other people based on what they do.
I hate to say it, though, part of the issue is I feel like our minds work like the Sorting Hat from Harry Potter, almost, in that we don't we tend to, as as you pointed out, you're talking about stereotypes. We tend to, in that case, right after we meet someone, we tend to shuffle them off into one of those stereotypes, and it becomes very difficult for us to move them into a different area of our brains. So I don't know, it just, like I said, the idea of the girl reviews, like what exactly are you looking for when or what, not exactly, but what is it that you're looking for and that you're looking at when you're talking about the humor being something that's comfortable to be going through as a female player, or in just so that our audience kind of I'm pretty sure most of them are probably intelligent enough to know what I'm talking about, but what sort of things are you speaking of, in more particular, like that makes something not comfortable, for example, for female players to play?
Well, personally, I'd prefer not to have to flirt with Orion slave girls. And just some of the missions are so full of innuendo. And a little bit okay, but sometimes it's just like, seriously, can you write humor that is not sex-based?
It's kind of weird because I never would have considered Star Trek particularly innuendo thick.
No, I don't think Star Trek is, but Foundry missions are.
I know.
Well, certain aspects of fandom of Star Trek have always been full of innuendo. I mean, there is an entire song called "The Sexy Data Tango" by someone called Voltaire. If people haven't heard it, it's hilarious. That just really talks straight to how much innuendo there is in Star Trek. It's kind of crazy.
And I mean, I guess if I stop and think about it, TNG annoyed the living daylights out of me because after they got rid of Natasha Yar, there was no strong female character.
Yeah, actually, well, one thing I noticed is that after they got rid of Natasha Yar, they started having Deanna and Crusher do more in the episode simply to make up for it.
Yeah, but the thing is, Crusher and Crusher and Deanna just are not. Okay, Troy just drives me crazy. She really does. She's just so. Ugh.
As a character, she falls into the maiden
Damsel in distress.
damsel in distress syndrome far too often. There are entire episodes written where basically the episode's whole premise is, okay, so something bad happened to Deanna Troy, and Will Riker has to save her. It's ridiculous.
Then there's the episode where she ends up being stuck as the only officer on the bridge during a major crisis. That one was actually pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, they started to develop her more towards the late end of TNG.
I actually thought what they did with her and Alexander was interesting.
Well,
And I
yeah.
like the episodes she's in with her mother.
Well, one of the things to remember about Deanna Troy, though, is that the character is written to be someone who is a
Empathic.
Well, I was going to say someone who's naturally a wimp. in that, as a Betazoid, she isn't a forceful person, I guess is the best way to put it. So she always wants to run away from danger instead of making the danger go away.
It's funny because Luxana is the exact opposite.
I was
Right.
about to say, yeah, like it's hard to say that that's because she's a Betazoid necessarily, because you
I suppose that
turn to her mom.
True to a certain extent, because actually, though, if you look at all the various Betazoids we've seen, a lot of Betazoids fall into that category. I mean, the Betazoid con officer on Voyager kind of fit in that category. Not that we got to see her all that much.
I was gonna say, did we see anything of her other than she gets killed
She's
10
in the
minutes
first
into the show?
episode. Then she dies halfway through, but But see, because Lon Suter is another example of a Betazoid who is a rather angry,
Suitor,
aggravated individual. I wouldn't say psychopathic, but
I'd say
he's
psychopathic.
I would too.
not. He's That's the word.
No, I think he's the definition of psychopathic.
Well, whatever.
There's I'm trying to think of, there's Tam Elbrum. Another.
Yeah. Because Tam was actually the kind of person who wanted to, run away from his problems, and eventually ended up with Gomtu because he was running away from his problems.
Anyway, we've kind of gotten off on a tangent.
Yep, we certainly have. But
It was
like I
nice
said, I'm sure you guys touched on it before I got here. So
Yeah, a little bit, but
talk about.
The one thing I didn't mention that is actually a stereotype that's true in my case is that I don't like combat. So that's another thing that affects me playing missions. I really enjoy a good story-based mission. Now, see, there are exceptions. I don't mind combat if it has a reason for existing.
If it has a purpose in the story.
Right. But if it's just combat so I can shoot at things, I really get no enjoyment from that. It's just like, why? And it's not very Trek to me.
It's not very Trek, but it is very Star Trek Online. Sadly, it really is. I mean, a lot of people, we have to remember that when they get interested in the Foundry and they start, hey, let's play with this and make our own stuff that what we can shoot at, and a lot of people will do that because they've been trained up until very recently. Every cryptic mission was fly into a system, fight something in space, beam to the ground, fight something on the ground, beam back up into space, fight the big bad guy in space, you win. And that was pretty much the whole mission. There were an awful lot of them that followed, that some variation on the beam into space, space, planet, space kind of combination for maps that people were trained to. You go to a map, you talk to some people, you fight some people, and so that's what a lot of them end up building.
Yeah, it's definitely an artifact of the initial MMO graft onto Star Trek, especially because the development time on this game was so short. They
So
pretty
short.
much just fell back on that pattern. And they've made more attempts to really kind of bring out the story aspect in the more recent stuff.
I was
But I
going to
think,
say, a good example is the redo of the early Fed content.
yeah, and I think that's one of those things that actually where the Foundry can really shine is because the Foundry is not beholden to that classic MMO formula. We can have missions that have no combat in it, or where
I've got 3 of them.
So yeah, I mean, really, I mean,
I guess what I like to do, and it's not my first mission and the first many that I published, and even today, some of what I decide to make will still include them. Kill objectives, when you make them optional, you make combat optional. So unless you make a hallway that's completely full of the enemies, whether they're optional or not, you can't get through. But by making combat objectives not really into kill, not making them into kill objectives, means you don't have to shoot everything, and you give the player the choice, and you make the ability to, hey, I'm a guy who likes to go shoot everything on the map. Well, you can do that.
I've actually seen a lot of missions and written one of my own where there are enemies placed on the map that
you don't have to run into them.
Yeah, you can like sneak off and run through the woods and avoid the paths and not shoot anyone, or you can go take the direct approach and shoot anything that moves.
I definitely, I mean, even with combat mobs, everything needs to have a reason to be there. It's one of those things that it's worth like really trying to justify mentally, internally for me. Okay, if this patrol is going through, why is he going through here? What is he doing there? What is his job? Who told him to go here? Don't
you
just
do that
put.
too, huh?
Well, yeah, I mean, but I mean, a lot of things have to kind of go that way for me. I mean, I'm a very detail-oriented person.
Yeah, I don't go as far as come up with entire histories and stuff for every NPC that's going to hit my map. But you're absolutely right that if as an author you just take the moment to say, why is this patrol moving through here? Even if that answer is simply they are the security team of this area. Why are they moving through here? Because this is their patrol route, and they've been assigned this patrol route by their community. Come up with the tiniest bit of who they are, and you really, as you build them, the maps feel more alive. And because that's happening, your players are going to feel like the maps are more alive.
Well, a lot of the times the question that comes in the form of the question I'll have to answer is, what was this group doing before you got there? Or what are they in the process of doing before you engage them in combat? And, I mean, why do you need to engage them in combat?
Yeah.
I had a thought while you guys were talking, and then I kind of lost my Wi-Fi for a second there, so I didn't get it out. And this is like the most obvious thing that I look for, and I totally just spaced it earlier. In a lot of Foundry missions, actually almost every single one I've played, if there is a female NPC, her dialogue is solely either just like a grant mission dialogue or possibly, a little medical dialogue here or there, or she's there to flirt with.
They become signposts.
Yeah.
You should
And
play
so,
my KDF mission, Diplomacy in the Gamma Quadrant. You might like the Endless character, or you might be scared of her. One of the two.
but see, like that's why I loved the Mayhem so much.
Thank you.
Is the fact that there are 3 main female characters, if you count the android, that have interesting dialogues that made me laugh. And, they're not one-dimensional paper cutouts that rocked. That's kind of like how I felt when I went from TNG to watching DS9 and we had Kira.
Yeah, you're very. Kira was, unfortunately, even during TNG, sometimes Dr. Crusher and Counselor Troy became signpost characters, which is what I call the characters that you're talking about, where their only job is you show up, you talk to them, and they tell you where to go and to go do something.
Well, I mean, in TNG, I think it was largely a matter of whether it was, if the script used that particular character much. Because, there's one episode where I don't think that either of them gets any lines whatsoever, simply because the focus of the episode is elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, because then you have episodes like the one where that quantum filament collides with the Enterprise, and it's basically the equivalent of a ship hitting a reef in the ocean, and everyone's scrambling to more or less prevent the Enterprise from exploding, and you have Counselor Troy as the sole officer on the bridge who has to deal with the life and death emergency.
Mm-hmm. See, there are times that I really like the character of Counselor Troy. There are times that I despise what they did with the character, because there's there are times that they do absolutely that you can tell that TNG was a show written by a writer's room, or written by, very often, scripts that were commissioned, or scripts that they had submitted, kind of deal, because from show to show, from week to week, you can see the difference in the way that people were dealing with various characters on the show. Some people literally only knew how to write a Picard story, or literally only knew how to write a Riker story, and they couldn't wrap their mind around, hey, I want to put Geordi in here too, or I want to have other characters. And so that's why you end up with some episodes that are very character centric.
Well, also that also kind of explains why there were some episodes that had minor characters that were, very well written and fleshed out, that never showed up again, or showed up only extremely rarely.
Mm-hmm.
Like that one instant that Geordi had as one of his assistants. I think I forget what her name was, but she showed up in like one episode, maybe 2.
She showed up in the second one, but then that was it.
Mm-hmm.
You were talking about the one who spilled hot chocolate on Captain Picard.
I think so. And another 2 more examples where, well, actually, on second thought, Sealar actually had a reason not to be seen again, but
mentioned a couple times.
Well, see, the thing with Sealar was that Sealar was unfortunately the victim of the fact that she was played by the same actress as another recurring character. And they decided they didn't want to confuse people by having the same actress play multiple characters simultaneously, so they just kind of like left Sealar off in the dark corner.
Yes, because Sealar was also Kalar and a Romulan, wasn't she?
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Susie Plaxton
exactly.
played a lot. She did. She did a bunch of work on Next Gen.
Oh yeah, she was brilliant.
Susie Plaxton did Sealar, Kalar, the female Q in Voyager.
Oh yeah.
She also did Dorian in Star Trek Enterprise.
Yeah.
That makes me think of Dr. Pulaski. I love that they stuck her in there for a season because she was not your typical female character either. And I actually hated her at first just because I'm a huge Data fan, and she was so mean to him.
Yeah, I get the impression she was kind of meant to be a female McCoy.
Yeah, that's what.
That was the character was created. How many people know why she was on the show for a season? Why Gates McFadden was not in the second season of TNG?
I don't remember.
So Gates McFadden was basically given a year to get her drug problems under control at that point in time. She was like Gene Roddenberry, I guess, considered all of his actors and all of, that it was like family, the whole feeling of being part of Star Trek from everything I've ever heard. And because it was like being a part of family rather than just firing her and replacing her, Gene Roddenberry said, we're going to replace you for a year on this show and you go get yourself together. And then proceeded to provide help in doing so. That was why she was gone for a year and then came back. So I don't think that the character of Pulaski was ever intended to be long term. And so I think a lot of things like the McCoyisms and things like that just were broad brush strokes of we know that this is a character trait that people have responded to before. Let's put it on this character. And, they weren't trying to create something that the audience was going to fall in love with there. So.
Well, but I kind of did by the end of the season.
So that they also wanted to make it so that Pulaski was definitely not the same as Crusher.
Yeah. And she never gelled with me. What about her appealed to you by the time the end of the season came around?
Well, the fact that she stood up to Picard for one thing, because none of the female characters really did. They were kind of all intimidated by him. I don't know. She just grew on me. I thought they actually did develop her character by the end of the season. I was actually bummed when Crusher came back.
Well, for me, what I liked about sorry,
Pulaski's chicken soup. That's all you need to know.
Well, for me, what I like most about the Pulaski character is that, she came across as someone whose general approach to most things was been there, seen that, and she kind of exuded that sort of not arrogance, but the sort of confidence that comes from having a whole lot of experience.
Very cynical.
Well, honestly, that's a trait that I've seen a lot in real life in people like that. So it's something that really just kind of made sense to me. Well, I mean, which one was it? Oh wait, that was a Crusher episode. Never mind.
And see, it's interesting because in Voyager, the main reason I can't stand Voyager is Janeway.
Really?
Kind of went off the deep end a lot.
And she was very stereotypically female too, for the most part.
Well, Janeway also had the unfortunate issue of the fact that Voyager was one of those TV shows where you watch it and it's very, very obvious that this show has multiple writers.
Yeah, that's the issue that I had with Voyager, is that the captain character is so up and down as far as the writing goes. sometimes she's written one way, and then the very next week she'll be written a completely different way, and
Yeah.
you don't get a chance to really get a sense of who that character is, because they do that, because they literally just change her character from week to week. One week she's strong and forthright about this particular topic, and the next week she's begging for someone's help, or regarding it, and it just never really, the show never connected with me.
And she is
Right.
consistently horrible at first contact, and the whole
Mhm.
show is first contact.
Yeah, it's pretty obvious that was not her best course at the academy.
Well,
So,
honestly,
and in our chat
I
room,
kind of
actually, in our chat room, Sir Boulevard is completely right. Is that very often the issue was that Janeway was written as the woman captain, not as the captain. And that happened too often. People really wanted to say, "Hey, look, we have a woman captain. It's a woman. Look." They did that a lot in Voyager.
Well, one thing I've noticed in Star Trek, though, is that Star Trek has a long history of demonstrating how first contact can go horribly wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because Janeway actually did have several episodes where she encountered races that, they were reasonably friendly with. I mean, you remember the whole Traub incident?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the Traub were like, we're very happy to have Voyager as friends, because they were hoping that Voyager could get rid of the Kazon.
Yeah. I mean,
Sneaky terrorists.
I'm of the opinion that the first episode of this season, when Brandflake said that one of his favorite Voyagers that happened was Warship Voyager, was the one that was set in the Hollow Museum, some
Yeah.
700
Oh, that
years
was
in
a
the
cool
future.
one.
Yeah,
The
that
Kyrian
is.
Museum of History.
Yep, that's such an interesting take on things, because to me, as a writer, I realize that of course we are always going to see the Federation as the heroes, because that's the point of view that we are given. We are given the idea that the Federation is right. They do the noble thing. And that's what it's been. That's for as long as there's been Star Trek. That's kind of what they give us, is that the Federation does that. Yes, living witness. Was that the name of the episode, Captain PFDennis, in our chat room? Yeah. Yeah. The As long as as long as there has been Star Trek, it's we've been given the Federation point of view, and when you take off the glasses of that point of view and say this is what's happening, I mean, if you're some of these other people that 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 Federation starships encounter, you might not see their interference as completely benevolent. So,
Well, I mean, there are a few episodes in the TV show that kind of touch on this. Granted, only a few. But, because there are actually multiple occasions in the TV show where someone questions the Federation's motives for interfering in a situation. And, there actually were one or two where they actually did say, like, okay, the Federation needs to go away. And eventually the Federation actually did. It didn't happen often.
I was just going to say the opposite too. Like the times the Federation doesn't interfere because of the Prime Directive, and let's allow genocide to happen because we totally can't interfere in this culture.
Well, actually, one of the things with the Prime Directive is that if another interstellar civilization is messing with the population of a planet, then the Prime Directive no longer applies. But if it's not an interstellar civilization that's trying to wipe out a group of people on a planet, then that's considered an internal matter.
then why did Starfleet not intervene in the whole Bajor Cardassia situation?
I think that was more
Be-
political than a prime directive.
Yep, I agree.
Because both the Bajorans and the Cardassians were interstellar civilizations. Like you said, that it was considered an internal politics thing of an alien civilization, and to a certain extent, the Prime Directive also applies to everyone, not just pre-warp cultures.
Well, we do know that the Federation and the Cardassians were at war for a time.
Yeah.
hmm
Right.
And so the Cardassians were powerful enough that the Federation couldn't intervene with Bajor without massive amounts of troops and
Right.
and either prolonging
Well, I mean,
or starting another war.
yeah, and the Federation really didn't want to start a war if, it could be avoided. And honestly, to a certain extent, they didn't have a good reason to uh, interfere because, at least at the start of the Bajor Cardassia War, the Cardassians weren't being really horrible. They were like, okay, we're going to take over your civilization now. Do what we say, and we'll leave you alone. That
It's
was the way
interesting.
it started,
It's
and it
interesting.
went downhill
Sorry.
from there.
I was just gonna say I'm reading the Tarak Noor trilogy right now, and it's very interesting. The perspective given in those books on the whole thing.
The other thing we don't know is whether the occupation of Bajor happened before or after the Federation made contact with the Cardassians.
That's actually a good point.
So by the time
Because
the Federation shows up,
It-
Bajor may have already been occupied.
Yeah,
we,
well,
we, we
Bajor
know
was
that
occupied
See,
for years.
what's interesting about that is you can see the difference between the types of storytelling that you're able to do on a movie sort of moving picture or television show and the thing we can do in the Foundry, in that we're sitting here saying apparently this was, or because there's no time in the 43-minute episodes of a television show when you subtract the time of American commercials. There's no time for them to explore the background of who how the Federation and the Cardassian War went down, or at least they choose not to go there because it doesn't move the overall narrative very far forward at all. And in the Foundry, you could, if you wanted to, for example, put a historical database that someone can look up things that happened during that war, or things that or they can look up great leaders and such. Where in the television show, you're not going to get that because that would be really boring. I mean, we see the characters do that occasionally. We see them go off and do a little bit of research, but it, overall, it's more about propelling the plot in a forward direction, and that doesn't
Yeah.
that sort of exposition doesn't do that. So
And there's a
well,
lot of Foundry missions that opt to explore the aspects of the unexplored aspects of not only Star Trek but STO.
yeah. So did how far are you guys in time? I came in really late. I mean, where are we on
I
time
think
wise?
we're about to the point where we can wrap things up.
Yeah,
We probably should.
Probably, yeah.
yeah. I think it's been about 2 hours, so I'm not sure if
Yeah.
we're going to do this on SoundCloud.
So before we head out, I wanted to bring up a couple things. Little community feedback that we got. First off,
no.
Drogan wanted to pass on a little bit of info following up to a discussion we had earlier about maxing or balancing max level players and low level ships. And he wanted to say that he did some testing and he found out that a pretty good balance is having the player face off against weak mobs and frigates, and then using cruisers as bosses. And he said
I can see that
that's
working.
Interesting.
yeah, that's what he kind of figured was the good average. He said in his his Mark 12 Mako gear that he could pretty much take on anything, even in a low level ship.
Okay.
So he was kind of dialing back from that and said that yeah, kind of figuring for someone who isn't flying in the most awesome gear ever, that
Mhm.
excuse me.
Well,
That it's good.
I
That
often
it's
fly
good for
ships
people that
that
have.
use random bits of whatever I happen to have.
Yeah, so it's so it's definitely possible to design the combat around a low level ship like an NX.
Hmm.
Also, and if I don't know if we want to give our thoughts really quick. Shiva Rubin kind of posted on or mentioned to us on Twitter, asking about what we thought about the possibility of Foundry Tech to be able to change the friendly enemy status of NPC groups.
Want
Definitely
Mhm.
Yeah,
want.
definitely.
I get the impression though from everything I've heard that it's not that simple. It would be a case of because I mean from everything I've seen, factions like throughout the game have set like friends, enemies for all other factions. It's not handled on a per group basis. So you would have to
Well,
create like custom factions for each variation that you wanted.
what Neverwinter has currently, they've got in the NPC groups, they've got this thing called Fight to Submission, where enemy NPC groups will become peaceful after you've dealt enough damage to them.
Yeah,
But
and that
also, there's the opposite. I can't remember what it's called. That can be used to trigger them to become enemies.
Mm.
yeah, and it would definitely be cool to get some of that tech in there as well.
Well, I mean, cryptic missions have used that tech in the past, and that's one reason why I'm hoping that we'll get it sometime.
Yeah, one can hope. All right, so before we head out here, just want to throw up if you want to contact us, you can email us at foundryroundtable@live.com. I've actually corrected the graphic from last week. It is live.com, not gmail.com. You can follow the podcast directly on Twitter at Foundry Roundtab. You can follow Drogan1701. Hippiejohn is hippie_JOHN. And I am at Greendragoon. All right, so I think that about wraps things up. Everyone want to go say goodnight?
Good night.
Good night.
Say good night.
Night.